A Caribbean hurricane is on the cards for next week on today's Tropical Weather Bulletin. And now the latest around the wide world of tropics. Tropical Weather Bulletin for June 28th. We're getting very close to our next tropical cyclone. Now a 90% chance for Invest 95L, which is the main feature that we're watching across the world today in the central Atlantic, which will be pulling towards the Caribbean region early in the next week. And we also have a few other areas of interest as well across the Atlantic right now on day 28 of hurricane season. 30% chance along the coast of Central America, which will be moving into the western Gulf of Mexico later in the weekend. And another 30% chance behind that current 90% chance, which could be moving along in tandem with that system as they move into the Caribbean Sea. On day 45 of the East Pacific hurricane season, we still have no systems yet, but one little area of interest there, a 10% chance. I should say no storms yet so far this year, but a 10% chance there for next week. Could be a system that develops into a tropical cyclone, but we're still not sure yet. In the Western Pacific, we've dropped any systems right now. There is a little feature there in the South China Sea that we did mark a few days ago and is moving through the Philippines. Not expected to become anything substantial, but could produce some locally heavy rainfall over southeastern China. In the North Indian Ocean, we have no areas of interest either, but an interesting feature there in the Arabian Sea, producing very high amounts of convection right now, mainly over areas of the water there, but possibly affecting the weather in Pakistan and possibly up to Iran. In the Southwest Indian Ocean, there's no areas of interest to point out right now. Of course, it is well into the off-season here, and in just a few days they'll be rolling over to a new naming list for the next season, which will obviously be when they get towards their summertime later in the year. Well, let's take a look at the main feature then. Invest 95L, the National Hurricane Center have upped it to 90% chance. That was earlier on, and it's currently 1750 kilometers from Paramaribo, 2222 from Barbados, 2351 from Trinidad, 2555 from Antigua, and 2991 from Puerto Rico. So we're still looking at some big distances there, but if you recall, compared to yesterday's update, those numbers are starting to tick down. That will continue over the next few days, and this system could develop into a strong tropical storm by the time we get to Sunday, or even a hurricane possibly. Well, looking at satellite imagery of the system right now, its appearance is pretty decent. You can certainly see that it's got some convection blowing up, possibly trying to do a little bit of banding there as well. The big question mark is whether it's got a center of circulation that's well defined enough yet to call it a tropical cyclone, and I would say probably not quite, but it will happen fairly soon, and we do all expect that it's going to become a tropical cyclone and storm. Well, there it is, currently moving towards the west at about 10 miles per hour right now, I think it was. Maybe a little bit more than that, and this is rapid scan imagery of the system right now as well. You can track it live on the Force 13 YouTube channel, our live stream, which will be covering this system 24/7, and we'll probably be doing some live coverage commentary on this system as well later on over the weekend, I imagine. Well, this is the Atlantic east coast of the United States there, a frontal system moving offshore, but a few other storms over the central United States as well. Looking at the Caribbean region here as well, you can see quite a bit of dust still in the region too, from the Sahara actually, that has been pushed across the Atlantic over the last few days, and there it is over the central Greater Antilles. And this is the Eastern Atlantic. You can see our system well off to the left hand side there, and quite a lot of dust again spewing off the coast of Africa. And this is the Eastern Pacific region. A quick look at it there, a little storm blowing up off Guatemala, but nothing exciting. Western Pacific is relatively quiet apart from that little system in the South China Sea as well. Some storms over the northern part of the Philippine Islands, and one or two little things on the intertropical convergence zone there out to sea. And in the Bay of Bengal, quite a few monsoonal showers that are still occurring all across India there, and some pretty decent storms there actually, which could cause some localized flooding. And this is the Arabian Sea, obviously, showing that system there as well, producing very high cloud tops, but being sheared quite heavily, it would appear, as it slowly moves northwesterly. Speaking of shear, this is the Atlantic shear map right now, and you can see a big kink down there towards the south, towards the Leeward Islands, which could end up interfering with that system later on. but certainly it's got a good chance in the next few days. Eastern Pacific there, systems might be struggling against moderate wind shear, and in the Western Pacific you can see a big area of wind shear much further north, but to the south in the Philippine Sea region it's low to moderate. Sea surface temperatures still look decent in the Eastern Pacific, pushing above 30 degrees Celsius in one or two parts of the Gulf of Tehuantepec. Up towards the Gulf of California, those temperatures are looking good there as well, pushing 28 degrees now. Gulf of Mexico looking good off the coast of Louisiana, particularly a hot spot, and the Florida Keys and western Florida up above 30 degrees Celsius. Also in parts of the Caribbean, those temperatures pushing 30 degrees too. Where Invest 95L is, it's around 28 to 29 degrees and will increase. Western Pacific very warm off the coast of the Philippines, over 30 degrees Celsius over a wide area of the Philippine Sea and off Taiwan and the South China Sea. And in the North Indian Ocean, a few areas of 30 degrees Celsius waters as well off the coast of West Bengal and Bangladesh, and Gujarat on the west coast there too. Compared to average, the Atlantic is still sizzling, with temperatures at 3 to 4 degrees above average there over a large part of the main development region and into the Caribbean Sea. Eastern Pacific is much closer to average, and the Western Pacific is generally a little bit above average, but certainly quite a bit above there in those less, more towards the subtropical zones from Taiwan through the southern Ryukyu Islands and out to sea. All in all though, very good conditions all round. Oceanic heat content is also looking still decent in a few parts of the Eastern Pacific, although not quite as good as one might expect. And in the Western Pacific, huge amounts of energy there off the coast of the Philippines extending out to sea. It's just waiting for something to enter that area and really light that fuse. In the Atlantic, we're looking at the Caribbean region there, really very high amounts of energy once again from the Gulf of Mexico down through the Yucatan Channel, through most of the Caribbean Sea and out over to the main development region off Barbados, so this system could capitalize on that, or even the one behind it. Well, let's check computer models then. This is the GFS over the next 5 days. Let's take note of that 30% system on the left there, moving through the Bay of Campeche, possibly becoming a tropical cyclone. And then we have our two systems here, hurricane there from 95L, and that's been well supported in the last few days there, although the GFS has backed off just a little bit on its peak intensity, but we are still looking at probably a Category 1, maybe pushing Category 2 status there as it moves into the Eastern Caribbean. GFS has it pulling close to Haiti there in those latest frames, in those last frames. In the terms of precipitation then, we're looking at substantial amounts over a fairly narrow track from 95L, and of course the one behind it producing its own area of rain as well, past a little bit further south. But 95L looks like it could produce a lot of rain over Haiti there. In general though, we're looking at maximums of 6 inches across the Lesser Antilles and 14 inches in one spot there in Mexico, to do with Invest 94L further towards the west. That's 350 millimeters, and getting up to 300 millimeters in Haiti from Invest 95. Looking at the moderate range then, we continue to watch those two systems push through. That second one much weaker into the Caribbean. The first one dying off near the Yucatan now according to that model run. The second one holding on just about through Cuba and then runs up the coast of Florida as a weak tropical storm and then on towards the coast of Georgia. That would be interesting and probably not too surprising actually to see a track like that, and it would remain fairly weak there. So really big question marks for the Atlantic over the next week or two. The early part of these systems is pretty well forecasted, but the later part not so much. Eastern Pacific might finally get its first storm as well, but it is looking a little bit more tenuous than it was looking yesterday, it has to be said, in the first week of July. Just a reminder once again that if we get to July 6, it will then be the slowest start in the satellite era for the Eastern Pacific, so it's really not having a good year so far, but things can pick up very quickly, especially in July. Scan the barcode and that will take you through to the Force 13 merch store, where you can take a look at all of our items as well as our full season and individual storm animations on request at any time. And are still waiting for Hode t-shirts, still available because we're still waiting for that storm in the Central Pacific. and it won't be there in the Scilly range either. As a matter of fact, there really isn't anything to show you in the Scilly range, day 10 to 16, so we're showing you a wide shot of the Eastern Pacific where we get quite a few little rotations trying to become tropical cyclones there. Ultimately, all of them failed to become tropical storms after that first one that we were watching, and so it looks like it remains a barren tropics once again after this phase of activity. But of course, it is a long way out. The GFS and other models can't always see that far out because they're dealing with the first system, so things might pop up later on that we'll start to track as we get towards the middle of July. Well, on this day, a certainly different scenario. It was a strong storm in the form of Hurricane Douglas in the Eastern Pacific, reaching a strong Category 4 status on this day in 1984. We also had Tropical Depression 5E, which would become our next storm there in the Eastern Pacific. I forget what the naming list was. I think it might have been Elida, I might be wrong. And elsewhere, no other storms, but a few days later, we would then see Tropical Storm Alex just off the coast of the Philippines out there in the Western Pacific. Beautiful pictured storm there, Douglas though. And back to today then, of course, 40 years later, we're here once again, the Atlantic. The next name on the list is Beryl. We might be seeing that soon. In the Eastern Pacific, it's Aletta. And in the Central Pacific, our first name or next name is Hone, which we've been waiting for 5 years. In the Western Pacific, our next name is Gamey, and in the North Indian Ocean, it will be Asna. Just 21 storms so far this year. We're more than halfway through the year, or about to be. So a lot of activity still ahead of us, but we are pretty far behind at the moment. In the Australian region, Robin's next up. Southwest Indian Ocean, it's Jeremy. Those names change in a few days. And in the South Pacific, our next name is Pitta. That's all from today's Tropical Weather Bulletin. We'll see you again tomorrow.
Become an ultimate fan today.